Hello and welcome to the Rabyd Atheist. I'm Rabyd, a former pastor turned atheist, now compassionate anti-theist. Welcome to my channel. Feel free to like or dislike the videos, so feel free to hit those buttons. Feel free to comment below, and I would appreciate it if you'd subscribe to the channel and hit your notification bell for more content as it is released. You're also free to share my videos as much as you like, because the purpose of this channel is educational in regards to atheist and deconversion issues and any issues related to those issues. A hearty shout out to the Rabyd Nation. Join the nation by hitting the subscribe button, and if you want to be a paying citizen of the Rabyd Nation and support the channel in a more tangible way, hit the join button and your options will be presented to you. Today I want to continue on in my deconversion story for 2023, and today we're going to put it to bed with an epilogue. Today I just want to talk about some of the aftermath of what happened after I left the church and after I left the faith completely. I also want to talk about some of the things in a nutshell as to far as what's happened to me since 2018, May 2018 when I left the church. There's a few things that have happened, and I want to go over some of that. But before I begin, I want to make something abundantly clear, because some of you may turn off this video once I get to the more nitty-gritty issues. But one of the accusations that Christians often make to people who become atheists is that they went through some sort of emotional thing with the church, they got hurt by the church, whatever, and that is the real impetus for their deconversion. They just don't want to have anything to do with the church anymore. I went through a lot of crap with the church, no denying it. Every one of my churches bounced me out pretty hard without a lot of fanfare and left me in a really awkward and bad positions. That's one of the perils of being a pastor. I went through the death of my father. I went through a whole bunch of things, emotionally speaking, and I did this all as an autistic person who has trouble with hypersensitivity, certain things bothering him, causing anxiety and depression. And yet I stuck with it for 40 years, and I stuck with the ministry for 20 years. Okay, now one would argue that I stuck with the ministry for 17 years, and the last 3 I was just in the ministry, but I wasn't really a believer in Christianity. But that's, a little bit of nitpicking, but it doesn't really matter. Because the point is, I didn't leave the faith because of any experience per se. I developed questions when I was in high school about the Bible and about faith in general. I went through Bible college. Those questions got compounded, not answered. Went through seminary, same thing. Got out of seminary. Had a lot of personal struggles, to be sure, but the questions about God, the question about the Bible, the questions about Jesus, the life of Christ, the questions about theology and doctrine such as sin and hell and all that stuff were there for all 20 years of my ministry and a large chunk of my Christian life. So there were highs and lows, and when I finally did deconvert in May of 2000, May 10th of 2015 is where I discarded sin and discarded Christianity in general. But I also later on, a year later in June 2016, discarded faith altogether. It was a year process of discarding all religious belief and becoming an atheist. I won't say that those were bad times for me. My kids were young, they were out of the house. The church was fairly stable. It wasn't giving me any trouble. The only trouble I was really getting is we weren't getting anywhere. So from a ministry standpoint, I wasn't growing the church, and that's not good for my future, but it wasn't a big emotional crisis for me. And so none of that factored into my deconversion. I simply deconverted because I had an honest, intellectual, long-term look at the claims of God, the claims of Christianity, the claims of the Bible, and eventually, by May of 2015, I discarded most of it, and by June of 2016, I had discarded all faith altogether. And a lot like a lot of people, I think the last thing that really left for me is this idea of somebody out there making things right, or even karma left for me, because I now don't hold the karma either. Okay, so none of that spiritual stuff is there either. All of that got discarded over a long period of time, where I realized that the Bible had problems. I went from being a fundamentalist, okay, Christian, to being a moderate Christian to being a fairly liberal Christian at the end, because I couldn't maintain anything. And so I was just looking for some spiritual life, to being a deist, to being an atheist while still in the pulpit. I want everybody to understand that this had nothing to do with some emotional trauma that I went through, because none of that really made sense. If anything, emotional side of things kept me in the faith. My love for my father and desiring to see him again, all the sunk cost fallacy emotions of staying in the ministry, because I've invested so much time in it, so much energy in it. But the rational, intellectual, logical part of me just couldn't maintain the faith. And if God really is out there and really real, they should appeal to some sort of intellectual faith, and there should be some sort of scientific reality that would reflect a God. But there isn't. And so, slowly but surely, that's what killed my faith. It had nothing to do with any of the trauma. And I think, I really, honestly, I'm going to tell you, it's kind of a dishonest thing to say to an atheist in the first place. Well, you just went through some emotional trauma, and that's why you no longer believe. No, because you're basically, as a Christian or a theist at that point, you're avoiding the deep questions of your faith and the fact that your faith has a lot of problems and you need to address those problems. I at least was honest about that. All right, a little bit of epilogue history. I'm not going to deep dive much of this stuff, but I do want to get it out there. Of course, after I left the church, I was still in flux with my now ex-wife. But we decided to make a go of it in August, and in September we moved into our own apartment. We both had jobs. We made a go of it. We started counseling. 6 months later, we dove out of counseling because of money. Well, at least that's what the stated reason. We were paying for it up to that point without too much problem. And we're getting counseling once a month for about an hour. I didn't feel it was adequate. We were doing a lot of book reading. I got to a point where I said, listen, we've read a lot. What are we going to do? Okay, I'm tired of talking about what we're going to do. We need to do something. And it was also about this time that my friend had persuaded me that maybe going to Texas and being a teacher might be the best idea for me. So that was mulling around in the mix. And I was really struggling with a lot of things at this point, and so I reached out to the Clergy Project at this point. And the Clergy Project did two things for me. The first thing it did, and if you're a minister out there and you don't have any faith anymore, go to the Clergy Project now, immediately. Don't wait. Don't think that there's a better time for it. Go do it now. Okay? That's my spiel. But the first thing they did is career counseling. And I got in touch with a career counseling program, and we went through. She very quickly realized I had a problem because I didn't have any contacts anymore. This is the problem with leaving the ministry. All your contacts are usually in the ministry, and if you leave the ministry and become a non-believer, none of those contacts really want to help you. I remember when I left the church, I went from just to give you, it's an example I use often, but I had 350 some Facebook friends. Most of them were ministry contacts and stuff like that. When I left the ministry and left the church the way I did, it dropped down to 175. Most of the people that were left, I think I still have 2 or 3 ministry people that were there. They're just my friends because they've been my friends for so long. Got to give them some credit for, being there and doing some stuff. But you have that aspect of where people were doing things where they were giving up on the friendship with me. And so I lost all my contacts, all my career contacts, a lot of my career contacts and ministry contacts. And I was starting a new job at the world's largest brick and mortar, and which I've been at 4 times in my life, because at that time I didn't really know what to do. What does a former preacher do? What does somebody that's with my education and background do? And so career counseling became pivotal. And out of that counseling, we went through designing your life. She began to realize, no, what you need is a new direction. And so she gave me the book Designing Your Life, and basically coming through the idea of career design and prototyping where you try out different things, and you come up with this list of things you can do. And I went through it, and I came up with 3 options: be a teacher, be an atheist advocate, and be a writer. Those are the 3 things that I ended up coming. Now, the writer, atheist advocate, have an iffy kind of aspect of it, as we all well know, about money. But the teacher was like, okay, I can make some decent money, more money than I've ever made in my life, if I follow this route. And my friend was talking about being a teacher in Texas. I was finishing up. I had just graduated in December of 2018. Me and my wife are trying to get things together. Graduated from 2018 and trying to, figure out what I was going to do. I had to finish an internship, so I was actually a semester after I graduated. I was still in, and I took some, the bullshit courses to keep my education, my financial aid coming in. But at that point, I began to realize, okay, being a teacher, being an atheist advocate, being a writer, let's pursue these 3, prototype them a little bit. The atheist advocate thing is what birthed this channel. Okay, I started this channel in January of 2020, and 2 months later, COVID hit. And so it became a way of finding something to do every day, because, I'm an essential employee, whatever the hell that meant back then. And, and I'm going back and forth to my new job, and we're making it. Me and my wife at the time were, supporting ourselves finally, and we were doing okay. We had both found good jobs. The irony of working at the world's largest brick and mortar was that I was making more money than I was in the ministry, okay, by itself. In fact, the only exception to that was one church that I had for 2 years where I was making more money. And that's the most I made in money, but I was making more money being a retail, minion than I was anything else. And so, my career just really didn't, seem to be really there in Walmart. Irony of ironies, at the time COVID broke out, I was a team lead, or I was actually a department manager all through that. And, I had some good moments, made some decent money at the time. And it was kind of ironic how things were going better for me financially in a lot of other ways outside of it. But I was trying to figure out what my career would be. Being an atheist advocate, started this channel, is pretty much the birthed in that idea. My writing took a different turn of how do I write for publication. I'm still working on that one. But the big thing that changed for me was the offer of psychological counseling through the Clergy Project. And this is probably the big part of the epilogue, because it's the struggle I've had since I left the ministry, okay, of the mental, what do I do now? Leaving the faith, leaving the ministry, not believing, being an atheist, are all big changes in my mind. And I didn't know what to do with all that. And so they hooked me up with counseling, which is only supposed to be like 12 weeks. My counselor stuck with me all this time, except for the time I was in Texas, because she wasn't licensed to practice in Texas. So that's one of the problems when I was a teacher in Texas that compounded things, because I didn't have any counsel what to do. I didn't have any psychological therapy, and I really should have got some, but I was trying to make a new start for myself. But one of the first things that we talked about was the affair that I had and how young the young lady was, and I had to ask myself if I had a problem. And after about 4 or 5 weeks of talking about it, my counselor comes back to me, Ed, you don't have a problem. What you had was an incredible high desire for some comfort and love, and you reached out to the one person that actually did that to you, okay, or at least as you perceived that they did that to you. And so, it comes out, really that, that it was just one of those things. She could have been any age, she could have been any person. It was what she did that mattered, and that's what drew me in. The other part of counseling, of course, was my marriage. I debated with this with my therapist for 3 straight years. COVID probably extended my marriage by another year, because I was really disgusted with the whole thing, but there really wasn't anything to do. We were in the middle of a COVID crisis at the time, and so we were leaning on each other quite a bit. But as anybody knows, once a crisis starts to alleviate, you start to begin to look at yourself. You know, one of the predictions about COVID, because we were spending so much time in our homes and together, is that two things would go on the rise after COVID was over. One was how many children were going to be born, and there does seem to be a little bit of a baby boom during COVID, by the way. And then the other thing was divorce attorneys, and that turned out to be a little bit true too. So, and in my case, it certainly was. After 3 years of trying to make it work, trying to get my wife to talk about certain things, respect. People ask me why I left, and one of them is I just didn't feel supported and I didn't feel loved anymore. I know that, you know, and the proof in the pudding is I offered her an option. I says, you can either come with me to Texas, be with your husband of 32 years, and try to make a go of it, and we will try to make enough money to pay off our debts, and in 3 years come back. You know, I'm not saying that we're going to be down there permanently. If it doesn't work out for us, it doesn't work out. And we'll come back. Or we can split up, and you can stay here and be with the children and grandchildren you love so much and leave your husband behind. And that's basically how it worked out. The second option is what she chose. At any time during that time, had she come up to me and said, you know, I love you, I don't want to live without you, any kind of thing like that. But it became really sad to me because it just, for me, it was more of she just gave up, okay? And the faith thing had a lot to do with it, whether she realized it or not. I think she really didn't know what to do with it. And so, you know, because we wouldn't talk about things that were real, and when I did open up and talk about things that were real, it would take her months to get back with me. And it was just, she was avoiding the problems, and that just wasn't acceptable to me. So in the end, I divorced her, divorce final in September 2021. I was in Texas, and I did the divorce hearing via Zoom. So that was kind of the end of that. Once I got down to Texas, I spent 1.5 years as a teacher of social studies, in particular world geography, which I hated the subject. It's just not my wheelhouse. It's probably the worst area of social studies for me is geography. So, even though I know where everything is, I don't really put a lot of stock into it. And a lot of the analysis stuff is just basic to me and bores the hell out of me. So I discovered a couple problems being a teacher, and this is where I didn't have counsel at this time. I didn't have career counseling. I didn't have therapy. And I'm going through this on my own. And one of the things I recognized about teaching that was a problem is I like to experiment and I like to do things my own way. And the way Texas does education, you just don't have a lot of room for that. They want you to fall in line with certain things. They want you to be in line with certain things. The TEKS, if you know what that is, are very restrictive. And, you know, so if you want to inject something, you know, a little bit color in your education, like my teachers used to do, where, you know, they would talk about stuff. You know, I remember my history teacher in high school injecting all this, you know, things about the Revolutionary War, things about the Civil War, the aftermath, little odd stuff that was out of the textbook. Yeah, you didn't have time for that. And I quickly discovered that the kids are onto the game, okay? They know it's a game, and they don't want to play half the time. And I respected that, to be honest. I started to take the side of the kids more and more, and the whole regimented, you know, guys, you know, I know this is a touchy subject, but I can understand why somebody who is a secularist or an atheist in the Deep South, if you're in the South, I can understand why you would want to homeschool your kids. Okay, I really can. Because the way they do it down there, it's just opened up for all kinds of stuff. At the same time, it's very regimented. I really felt like I was in prison, and I was just one of the wardens, you know, and one of the guards and the wardens. And I just, you know, after a while, it just wasn't fun. I had a lot of fun with the kids. Ninth graders are really squirrely, but I had a lot of fun with them. The problem was I began to feel more and more overwhelmed. homesickness. I really miss Michigan. I was missing my family a lot more than I thought I would. What I didn't know at the time was my hypersensitivity with the heat and the brightness. It was always sunshiny, no four seasons, no break from that, no change. It just I really felt like, I was I was one of the few white people in a Hispanic apartment complex pretty much. And so I didn't really understand the language of the people around me. I was trying to learn a little Spanish, but it wasn't coming easy for me. And just the whole hypersensitivity, the divorce, the career change, that's just a lot of changes. And it was beginning to weigh on me pretty heavily. And by the second year, I couldn't take it anymore. And after Christmas, I got a little bit into January, and I said, hey, I need to go home. I need to go home. And it was a big move for me, and many of you know parts of this story. And so I just want to wrap that up. We'll talk more about some of the stuff I went through. But when I came back, I immediately got in touch with my counselor. She said, yeah, absolutely, I'll take you back on. And within a month or two, she said, Ed, do you ever consider that you might be autistic? And she gave me some stuff to look at and research, and I took some of the tests, and I read about it, and I read the psychological profile of autism. And even though I haven't had any testing, I'm like, this really fits. And then I started doing things to manage my hypersensitivity according to assuming autism, and they worked. And I've been in a better mood and a better place ever since. I'm still, anxious about a lot of things. I'm trying to make this channel work so I have another income stream. I would love to get back to the income level I had in Texas, but that's going to require, a couple thousand more a month. But, YouTube can do that in a couple of years. We'll see. But my point is this. I began to pursue the other two career options, being a writer and being an atheist advocate. I still have to probably prototype something else. You should always keep about 3 or 4 things in your pocket of things you can do, no matter how old you are. So I'm trying to figure out how to take some of my education and other things and do that. But the therapy sessions now have been focused on, okay, how do I deal with autism? How do I deal with life? The channel's success has actually been an issue because from a therapy standpoint, because I'm like, how do I deal with success? I've never really been successful before. One of the things that I think autism has short-circuited me all my life up until this point is success in any endeavor, because I'll get to a certain point and I just get bored with it and I just want to check out, and then I'm just not into it anymore. The ministry was the only exception to that, but I would have large periods of it was just drudgery. I was just doing the job. But now that I'm managing the hypersensitivity a little better, I understand when my mood is bad and why, that it's not necessarily, it's my nervous system. It's wired just differently. It's not neurotypical. It makes a lot of sense and it works. And I've had a lot of breakthrough in my own behavior and how I'm doing in the last year, more than any other time that I've had in the ministry. And that's why I want to start talking about deconversion, and I want to talk about deconstruction and construction. Those are messages to those of you that are going through it. The real problem for those of us that are secularists and atheists folks is you're going to see theists comment on both of those posts. And the reason they're doing it is they don't like what I'm doing. One of the things I think I've learned, and this is where I'm going to end this epilogue, is theists really don't like me that much. I think I'm the ultimate traitor to them. I was a pastor, I was a minister, I have education in Christian schools. I was in this for 40 years, 20 years a minister, 2 years as an atheist pastor, 1 year as a deist pastor, but it doesn't change the fact that I know a lot and I know too much. And coming on this channel and throwing out the Christian tropes just doesn't work for me. It really doesn't. And I think they hate that wall. I've gone from just being tolerated as an atheist in my life and community and all that other stuff. I've gone from that to now being slightly attacked on a regular basis. And I think this is going to get worse as the channel grows. And I'm trying to come to terms with that. The real problem I have with that is I don't wish anybody ill will, okay? But somehow, because I don't believe anymore, I've become the ultimate Judas. And I'm not just a Judas, I'm a Judas with weaponry. You know, I know the theology, I know the Bible, I have ministry experience, so I know what's going on in churches. And it really has put me in a position now where I think being an atheist advocate is going to work. And because I'm managing some other things better, I'm staying focused on it a lot better. Hopefully that will continue. I don't offer any guarantees. But I want to close out this story at this point because now, from now on, Fridays are going to change into me talking about reconstruction. How do you build your life back up? I need this for myself, but I'm hoping that I'll also help you as well. So that's kind of the direction, but I wanted to put an epilogue and end to the story, some of the things I've been doing since. And we're going to go into a deep dive of some of the details of some of the things I've learned since. You know, I'm not an expert, I'm not a psychologist, but I've been through it. And I can at least offer my anecdotal experience, and maybe that will help you. Well, thanks again once for stopping by. I appreciate every like, share, and subscribe. You guys are awesome. This channel has really grown. The watch hours are climbing. It's pretty close to what I'm going to predicting that somewhere in December this channel will get ad revenue. And that's all due to you, so thank you very much. As always, once again, live your best life. You only get one go around and then it's over. So don't waste your time, your money, your talent, your treasure, all of that stuff on the trappings of faith and religion. Instead of put it into your own life and your family and your friends and those you care about and love and trying to make a better world. You'll be much more happier, trust me, I speak from experience. And as always, thanks for stopping by, and I'll catch you next time.